They laughed when the heavy woman asked for a room, but months later, every family in the mountain settlement would be waiting for that same woman to tell them whether they still had a home. Mara Venn arrived in Bellweather, carrying one worn suitcase, a small wooden recipe box, and the last of her hope. By sunset, strangers had mocked the size of her body, refused her a place at their tables, and watched in silence as she walked toward the mountains, with tears freezing on her round cheeks. They believed the cold would frighten her back. They believed a woman like Mara could never survive beyond the town lights. What they did not know was that a lonely mountain man was about to open his door to her. An old dead woman's letters were about to reveal a terrible secret, and Mara Venn had spent her whole life learning how to stand when the world wanted her to disappear. The coach reached Bellweather late on an October afternoon, climbing the last narrow road beneath a sky the color of old silver. The settlement sat in a high valley, surrounded by dark pine forests and steep mountains, already dusted with snow. From a distance, it looked peaceful. Smoke curled from stone chimneys. Golden light shone through shop windows. A little white church stood near the center of town, and beyond it, a row of cabins followed the bank of a fast, clear creek. Mara pressed one gloved hand against the coach window and allowed herself to imagine that this place might be kind. She had learned not to expect kindness, but hope was a stubborn thing. Even after everything, it kept returning. When the coach stopped outside the Bellweather Hotel, the driver climbed down and set a wooden step beneath the door. Mara waited until the other passengers had left. She always waited. It was easier than feeling people stare while she struggled through a narrow doorway. She gathered her dark green skirt, turned carefully, and lowered herself to the step. The coach shifted under her weight. A pair of boys standing near the hitching rail snickered. "Careful," one of them said. "She'll tip the whole thing." The driver gave the boys a hard look, but he said nothing. Mara pretended not to hear. She had become very good at pretending. She stepped down with as much dignity as she could and adjusted the collar of her brown wool coat. She was a very full-figured woman, with heavy arms, a soft round face, and thick dark hair that fell in loose waves beneath her hat. Her expressive brown eyes revealed too much, so she lowered them whenever laughter followed her. The hotel clerk looked past her when she entered. "Next," he called. "I believe I am next," Mara said. The man blinked, then looked her over from hat to boots. His gaze paused at her waist. "You need something?" "A room. I wrote 3 weeks ago. Mara Venn." She opened her handbag and took out a folded letter. "Mr. Pell said there would be work in the hotel kitchen and a room upstairs." The clerk read the letter twice. "Mr. Pell sold the hotel last month. I'm Amos Rusk. I don't know anything about an arrangement. I came nearly 400 miles. That is unfortunate." Mara looked toward the dining room, where the warm smell of beef stew drifted through an open doorway. Every table was empty except one. 3 women sat drinking tea. Their conversation had stopped. One leaned close to another and whispered, not softly enough, "Imagine putting her in a kitchen. There'd be nothing left for the guests." The women laughed behind their cups. Mara's fingers tightened around the letter. "I can cook," she said to Amos. "I can keep accounts. I can sew, clean, preserve food, and manage supplies. Mr. Pell said your cook was leaving before winter." "We hired someone. May I rent a room for tonight at least?" Amos rubbed his jaw. "Our beds are old. The frames aren't built for every kind of traveler." The meaning was clear. Heat rose into Mara's face. The women in the dining room looked away, but their smiles remained. Mara folded the letter along its old creases and returned it to her bag. "Thank you for your honesty," she said, though honesty was not what he had given her. Outside, the coach driver was tightening a strap. "Everything settled?" he asked. Mara looked at the coach. For one desperate moment, she considered begging him to take her back down the mountain. But the stage was continuing north, not returning to the city she had left. And there was nothing waiting for her there except a rented room she could no longer afford, and memories of doors closing. "Everything is fine," she said. She carried her suitcase across the muddy street. Bellweather was small enough that news moved faster than feet. By the time she entered the general store, the owner already knew the hotel had turned her away. He offered her crackers, cheese, and a look of false concern. "You might try Widow Sayer," he said. "She rents a little room behind her laundry." Widow Sayer stared openly at Mara when she answered her door. "The room is narrow," she said. "I don't need much space." The widow's eyes traveled over her body. "Looks to me like you do." Mara heard laughter from inside the laundry. She swallowed. "I can pay for 1 week in advance." "I don't think it would suit." The door closed. By dusk, Mara had asked at 7 homes. 2 had spare rooms but would not rent to her. 1 woman said her children might be frightened. A man outside the feed store offered to let Mara sleep in his barn if she agreed to keep him warm, and his friends laughed until she walked away. At the church, she found Reverend Cole stacking hymn books. He listened with a serious face, then explained that the parish room was being repaired. "There must be somewhere," Mara said. "I only need shelter for a few nights. I will work for it." The Reverend glanced toward the window, where snow had begun to drift through the dim light. "There is an old trapper's cabin above the North Ridge. Ivo Marr lives there now. Would he rent me a room? Ivo doesn't like people. Neither does anyone else here, it seems." The Reverend winced, but he did not deny it. "You should not climb the ridge at night. The trail is difficult." "Then may I sleep here?" His hesitation answered before his words did. "The church council would have to approve it." Mara nodded slowly. She could feel herself breaking, and she would not do it in front of him. Of course. She stepped into the cold. Behind her, the church door shut with a quiet click. Lamps glowed in windows all around the square. Families gathered around supper tables. A fiddle began playing inside the hotel dining room, followed by the sound of warm voices. Mara stood alone beneath the first snow of the season, and something inside her gave way. She walked past the last cabin before the tears came. She tried to stop them, but every cruel word from that day joined all the cruel words that had come before. Too large, too slow, too much. Her aunt telling her no man would ever choose her. A shopkeeper charging extra to alter a dress while joking about the amount of cloth. Children following her down a city street and waddling behind her. The broken promise of work in Bellweather had been the last thin thread. Now it was gone. Mara left the road and followed a trail rising through the pines. Her suitcase struck her leg with every step. Snow gathered on her coat and melted in her hair. The climb was steep, and before long her breath came in painful pulls. Still, she kept walking. Going back meant asking people who had already seen her humiliation to witness more of it. The trail divided near a frozen spring. Mara chose the wider path, but it soon narrowed and disappeared beneath fallen needles. Twilight settled quickly in the trees. Wind moved through the branches with a low, restless sound. She stopped and listened. Somewhere far above, an animal called. The answering cry came from the next ridge. Fear finally pushed through her grief. She turned, but the forest behind her no longer looked familiar. Every trunk was black, every patch of snow the same pale gray. Her boot slid on a hidden root. She fell hard against the slope, losing her suitcase. It rolled several feet before striking a tree and bursting open. A nightdress, 2 books, and her small wooden recipe box spilled into the snow. Mara crawled after the box and pressed it to her chest. It had belonged to her mother. The cards inside were stained with flour and years of handling. Suddenly, preserving those small pieces of paper felt more important than preserving her pride. "What are you doing up here?" The voice came from the darkness above her. Mara gasped and turned. A man stood between 2 pines, holding a lantern in one hand and a long hunting rifle in the other. He was tall enough to seem part of the forest, broad across the shoulders, with a dark beard and a severe face shaped by weather and solitude. A scar crossed one eyebrow. His grey eyes moved from Mara to the scattered clothes and back again. "I am looking for Ivo Marr," she said. "Why?" "The Reverend said he might have a cabin." "The Reverend talks too much." Mara studied him. Are you Ivo? You are lost. That was not my question. For the first time, something almost like surprise touched his face. He lowered the rifle. Yes, I'm Ivo. Mara tried to stand, but pain shot through her ankle. She caught the tree beside her and bit back a cry. Ivo set down the lantern, gathered her clothing without comment, and placed everything inside the broken suitcase. Can you walk? He asked. I can manage. She took one step and nearly fell. Ivo caught her by the elbow. His hand was firm, but he released her at once. You cannot manage. I have heard enough opinions about what I can and cannot do today. That was not an opinion. Your ankle is swelling. Then point me toward your cabin. It is half a mile uphill. I will crawl if I have to. Ivo stared at her for a long moment. You are either very brave or very foolish. At present, I do not care which. He tied her suitcase closed with a length of cord and lifted it easily. Then he offered her his arm. Mara hated needing it, but the cold was deepening and her ankle throbbed. She placed one hand against his sleeve. Together they climbed. Ivo's cabin stood in a clearing beneath a wall of stone. It was larger than Mara expected, built from thick pine logs with a roof of split cedar. A shed and stable leaned against the trees. Light from the lantern revealed stacked firewood, a water pump, and neat paths worn into the earth. The place was not poor or careless. It was simply lonely. Inside, a banked fire glowed beneath a stone chimney. There was one main room, a small kitchen, and two closed doors along the back wall. Hunting tools hung above a workbench. Books filled a shelf near the hearth. A woman's blue shawl lay folded over the back of a chair, untouched by dust. Ivo noticed Mara looking at it. His face closed. Sit, he said, pointing to a bench. Mara lowered herself carefully. The bench gave a sharp creak. She froze. Ivo looked at the wood, then at her. It does that in cold weather, he said. There was no amusement in his voice. Somehow, that small mercy nearly made her cry again. He knelt to examine her ankle. Not broken. You twisted it. I will leave in the morning. The trail will freeze overnight. Then, as soon as it is safe. Where will you go? Mara looked toward the fire. I have not decided. Ivo stood. There is a spare room. You may use it tonight. I can pay. I did not ask. People who say they want nothing usually collect a larger price later. His eyes hardened. Then sleep in the shed. Mara looked up, startled. You came to my door, he continued. I did not drag you here. I offered a dry room because snow is falling and you are hurt. If you believe that makes me dangerous, the shed has a roof. She heard the truth beneath his harshness and felt ashamed. I am sorry. Today has not encouraged trust. Trust is expensive. Keep yours until you can afford it. He gave her a folded blanket and showed her the spare room. It held a narrow bed, a washstand, and a chest. The walls were plain, except for a small painting of summer flowers. Mara sat on the bed and listened until Ivo's footsteps moved away. Then she pressed both hands over her face and wept as quietly as she could. She did not know Ivo stood on the other side of the door. He had heard grief before. He knew the sound people made when they tried to swallow it so no one else would be troubled. His late wife, Talia, had cried that way during her final illness. For a moment, his hand lifted toward the door. Then fear tightened around his heart, and he walked away. Mara woke before sunrise to the smell of coffee and wood smoke. Her ankle was stiff, but held her weight. She found Ivo at the table repairing a leather harness. There is porridge in the pot, he said. Mara looked inside. The porridge was gray and thick enough to mend a wall. Did you salt it? She asked. Yes. How much? Some. She tasted it and tried not to react. You have made something very powerful. It is porridge. It could frighten a bear away from the cabin. Ivo slowly set down the harness. Mara waited for anger, but one corner of his mouth moved. Can you do better? He asked. With permission. He nodded toward the shelves. Mara found oats, dried apples, cinnamon, and a jar of dark mountain honey. She warmed the apples in a small pan, added the spice, and loosened the porridge with milk. When she set the bowl before Ivo, He regarded it as if it might contain a trick. Then he took one bite. "Well?" Mara asked. "It is less useful for repairing walls." "I will accept that as praise." The storm continued for 3 days. Mara could not return to town, and Ivo did not suggest that she try. He expected her to remain near the fire, but by the first afternoon she had reorganized the pantry, found weevils in a sack of flour, and turned a basket of soft apples into spiced preserves. She repaired the torn lining of his winter coat. She calculated that his feed supplier had charged him twice for the same delivery. When the chimney began to smoke, she noticed a change in the draft and warned him before the room filled. "You know chimneys?" he asked as he cleared a bird's nest from the cap. "I know air rises, birds build nests, and smoke belongs outside." Ivo glanced down from the ladder. "The town sent you away." "They did not send me. They simply made every place unavailable." Fools. It was one word, spoken without pity. Mara carried it with her all day. When the weather cleared, Ivo hitched his wagon. Mara packed her suitcase and climbed beside him. Neither spoke much during the descent. The valley spread below them, bright with new snow. Bellweather's roofs looked harmless from above. At the hotel, Amos Rusk came onto the porch. His gaze moved from Mara to Ivo. "You found her, then?" "She found me," Ivo said. "I came to ask once more whether there is work," Mara said. "I can provide references." Amos crossed his arms. "Guests have heard you spent 3 nights alone with Marr. Some respectable families might be uncomfortable." Mara's face went still. "I was injured in a snowstorm. People talk." "Yes," Ivo said. "Usually because thinking is harder." Amos flushed. 2 men near the hotel door laughed, but this time they were laughing at him. Mara visited the general store, the laundry, and the church. No one offered work or lodging. The reasons changed, but the answer remained no. Outside the bakery, a little girl stared at Mara until her mother pulled her away. "Don't point," the woman whispered. "It is rude," the child whispered back. "But why is she so big?" "Because she eats too much, I suppose." Mara walked faster. She made it as far as the wagon before her vision blurred. Ivo waited until they had passed the last house. "You can stay at the cabin through winter," he said. "Out of charity." "No. I need someone who can keep accounts and preserve food. You need a roof. We can agree on wages. You do not know me." "I know you fixed my coat without being asked. I know you found an error that saved me $12. I know you insult porridge with courage." A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Ivo's expression softened. "Stay until spring, then decide what you want." Mara looked back at the settlement. She had arrived wanting its acceptance. Now the thought of asking again made her tired. "All right," she said. "Until spring." The arrangement should have felt awkward, but work gave their days a natural rhythm. Ivo rose before dawn to check traps, cut timber, or guide hunters through the higher passes. Mara kept the cabin, but she refused to be treated as a servant. She prepared meals because she loved the quiet magic of turning simple things into comfort. She also balanced Ivo's accounts, planned winter stores, read contracts, and wrote letters for him in a clean, graceful hand. Ivo discovered she could recognize plants by scent and make a cough syrup from pine tips and honey. Mara discovered he carved tiny wooden birds when he could not sleep. He left them on shelves and windowsills, all facing the door. "Are they waiting for someone?" she asked. His knife stopped. Talia liked birds. It was the first time he had spoken his wife's name. "Tell me about her," Mara said. Ivo stared into the fire. "She was not my wife for long. 3 years. We built this cabin together. She became ill the second winter. By spring she could hardly stand. I am sorry." People say that as if sorrow is a room with a door. It is not. It is weather. You learn to live inside it. Mara understood more than she wanted to. "My parents lost our farm when I was 12. My father spent years trying to prove the papers were false. He died believing he had failed us. My mother lasted 2 winters after him. I think shame can make a person ill." "Who took the farm?" "A bank and a land agent. They changed the boundary description on an old loan. My father signed one paper, but the court received another. No one listened because the agent was wealthy and we were not. Ivo's grey eyes rested on her. And after, relatives took me in. They made sure I understood what my food cost them. She forced a small smile. That is why I learned to cook. If I prepared every meal, they complained less when I ate one. Ivo looked away, jaw tight. Cruel people are often proud of calling themselves honest. Their life drew the attention of Bellweather despite the distance. People came to Ivo's cabin when they needed him to repair a roof, track missing livestock, or guide a wagon through snow. At first, they barely acknowledged Mara. Then they tasted her bread. Nessa Orr arrived one bitter morning carrying her coughing son. She was a thin, pale woman with tired blue eyes and a coat too light for the weather. Her husband had injured his back in the mine. Their youngest child had a fever, and the town doctor was away. Mara brought the boy inside, wrapped him in blankets, and listened to his breathing. She made steam with herbs, cooled his forehead, and sent Ivo down the mountain for the doctor. Nessa sat beside the bed, twisting her hands. "I heard what people said when you came," she whispered. "I did not join them." Mara stirred honey into warm water. Silence can sound very much like agreement when you are the one being laughed at. Nessa lowered her eyes. Yes, Mara could have turned her away. Part of her wanted to. Instead, she cared for the child until the doctor arrived. The boy recovered. Afterward, Nessa began visiting once a week. She brought eggs when she had them and gossip when she did not. "Half the settlement wants your cough syrup," she said one afternoon. "The other half says, Ivo has been bewitched by a dark-haired kitchen sorceress." Mara looked down at herself. A sorceress would choose a more practical shape. Robes are never cut generously. Nessa laughed so suddenly that tea spilled into her saucer. Mara helped other families through the winter. She delivered soup to Widow Sayer during a fever, though the widow had refused her a room. She stretched the Kale family's flour when the mountain road closed. She taught 3 young mothers how to preserve meat safely. People accepted her help while continuing to speak about her body. They praised her pies, and then joked that she must sample half of each one. They called her useful, but never invited her to their tables after the work was done. At night, Mara carried those remarks back to the cabin. She waited until Ivo slept, then stood before the small mirror in her room. She would pinch the heavy flesh of her arm, or pull her nightdress tight across her stomach, searching for the reason strangers believed they knew her. Sometimes, she cried into a towel, so the walls would hide the sound. One night, Ivo heard her. He sat on the edge of his bed, hands clenched. Every instinct told him to go to her, but another memory held him still. Talia asleep against his chest. Talia coughing blood into a white cloth. Talia promising she was not afraid, while terror filled her eyes. Love had not saved her. It had only given grief a name. In the morning, he was colder than usual. Mara thought she had offended him. For 2 days, their easy conversation disappeared. On the 3rd evening, she found him outside, splitting wood long after the pile was high enough. "If you want me to leave, say it," she said. The axe struck the block. "I do not." "Then why do you look angry every time I enter a room?" "I am not angry with you. That leaves the weather, the wood, or yourself." He rested both hands on the axe handle. Snow drifted between them. "You cry at night." Mara went still. "I do not mean to listen," he said. "These walls are not thick enough." Humiliation burned through her. "You may forget it." "I cannot." "Then perhaps you can pretend." "I have done that for years." She turned toward the cabin, but Ivo caught her hand. He did not pull her back. He simply held on. "What they say is not true," he said. "Which part?" "They say many things. That you are less because there is more of you." Mara stared at their joined hands. "You do not have to comfort me. I do not know how." Despite herself, she looked up. Ivo's face was open in a way she had never seen. "When you came here, I thought you would be helpless. I thought I would spend a night rescuing you and a week trying to get rid of you. I was wrong. You are the most capable person I know. You see what people need before they ask." You make a room feel warm even when the fire is low. And when they hurt you, you keep your heart kinder than they deserve. Tears filled her eyes. Kindness does not mean their words do not cut. I know. No, Ivo. You can walk into town and people move because they respect you or fear you. I walk into a room and watch every eye measure whether a chair will hold me. I know when a woman is worried I might touch her food. I know when a man is being polite because he thinks no one else could want me. You cannot tell me not to hear what I have heard my whole life. Then hear me too. His fingers tightened around hers. You are not a joke in this house. Mara's breath trembled. What am I? The answer frightened him. She saw it in his eyes before he released her hand. You are safe here, he said. It was not enough, but it was more than she had expected. She nodded and went inside. Winter loosened slowly. The first sign of spring was not a flower, but the arrival of 3 men in clean black coats. They rode into Bellweather beneath a blue flag marked with a silver mountain. Their leader was Conrad Vale, regional director of the North Crest Land Company. He was handsome in a polished way, with pale gloves, careful hair, and a smile that never reached his eyes. Conrad called a meeting at the church. He told the settlers that North Crest had purchased timber and mining rights in the valley. The company planned to build a new road, expand the mine, and bring jobs to Bellweather. Most families applauded. Then he placed contracts on a table. A few boundary adjustments will be necessary, he explained. Nothing severe. In exchange, North Crest will pay each affected family a fair sum. Nessa brought one of the contracts to Mara. Jory wants to sign. They offered more money than we have seen in 2 years. Mara read the document twice. This does not sell a strip of your north field. It transfers access to the spring. They said we could still draw water. It says they may restrict access for industrial use. Nessa's face paled. Without that spring, our animals die in summer. Ivo examined his own notice. North Crest claimed the stream crossing the lower part of his land had belonged to the old Bellweather Mining Trust since 1872. He had 30 days to accept compensation or contest the claim in county court. This boundary is wrong, he said. Talia's father marked the stream when he gave us the land. Do you have the original deed? Mara asked. Somewhere. They searched the cabin that evening. Ivo opened trunks he had not touched since Talia's death. Mara handled each item carefully. Dresses folded with lavender, a silver hairbrush, a bundle of sheet music, letters tied in blue ribbon. Grief entered the room with every lid they raised. We can stop, Mara said. No, Ivo's voice was rough. If I stop, I may never open them again. Near midnight, Mara lifted the false bottom from a cedar chest. Beneath it lay a leather ledger and a packet of letters sealed with faded red wax. The ledger belonged to Ivo Marr, Ivo's father-in-law, who had served as Bellweather's land recorder 20 years earlier. Mara carried the papers to the table. The first pages listed property transfers, water shares, and survey markers. Most entries were ordinary. Then she noticed that several lines had been crossed out and rewritten in a different hand. Look at the ink, she said. These changes were made later. Ivo leaned closer. What do they mean? I am not sure yet. The letters provided part of the answer. They had been written to Elias by a county surveyor named Daniel Rook. In the earliest letter, Daniel warned that agents connected to the Bellweather Mining Trust were paying officials to move boundary lines on record copies. Another described missing maps. The final letter was short and frightened. Daniel wrote that he had prepared a complete list of the altered claims and hidden a duplicate survey where the first water sings beneath the stone. Ivo read the line again. The first water. Do you know what it means? Talia used to call the spring above the old mill first water. Her grandfather found it before Bellweather was built. Mara opened the ledger to the most heavily altered page. North Crest did not simply purchase old rights. Someone created those rights by changing these boundaries years ago. Why wait until now? Perhaps they were waiting until the land became valuable. Mara's hands had begun to shake. The false descriptions, the later ink, the friendly contracts written to hide what was actually being taken. She was 12 again, standing beside her father, in a courthouse, while a well-dressed agent explained that paper mattered more than memory. Ivo saw her face. "What is it?" "This is how they took my family's farm." Her voice became thin. "Not the same men, the same method." "Then you know how to stop them." Mara closed the ledger. "No, I know what happens when no one does." The next morning, she and Ivo took the papers to Sheriff Dane. He was a tired man who disliked conflict and admired anyone with money. Conrad Vale happened to be sitting in his office when they arrived. "Miss Venn," Conrad said warmly, "I have heard about you. I am sure you have." She showed the sheriff the altered ledger. Conrad barely glanced at it. "An old private notebook proves nothing," he said. "The county records support our claims." "Because the county records were altered," Mara replied. "That is a serious accusation from a woman with no legal position in Bellweather. Truth does not require property." Conrad's smile narrowed. "But a court requires evidence." The sheriff handed the ledger back. "Unless you find the original survey, I cannot do anything." Outside, Ivo wanted to ride directly to the spring. Mara stopped him. "Conrad heard the letter," she said. "If his people follow us, they will find the survey first." "Then what do you suggest?" "We let him believe we do not understand the clue." They returned to the settlement and asked harmless questions in public. Mara wondered aloud whether first water might refer to a church baptismal record. Ivo visited the cemetery and inspected old stones. Meanwhile, Nessa quietly gathered copies of every contract North Crest had offered. She had spent years being overlooked, and now, being overlooked became useful. At night, the three of them compared documents at Ivo's table. Mara discovered that North Crest was targeting 17 properties. Together, those properties controlled every creek, spring, and narrow passage into the valley. Once the company owned them, the remaining farms would be nearly worthless. "They are not buying pieces," Nessa whispered. "They are closing a hand around the whole settlement. And everyone thinks the hand is offering money," Mara said. Nessa looked sick. People trust Conrad. People often trust a polished boot more than a muddy one. The pressure increased. Conrad's agents visited families after dark. They warned that anyone who refused to sign might receive nothing after the court ruled. The Cales signed first. Widow Sayer followed. Amos Rusk agreed to let North Crest use the hotel for company offices. At Sunday service, Reverend Cole announced that resistance was dividing the community. He did not name Mara or Ivo, but every face turned toward them. Afterward, a crowd gathered outside the church. Amos stepped forward. "You came here with no home and no stake in this valley," he told Mara. "Now you are frightening decent families with stories from an old book. I am reading the contracts you chose not to read. You enjoy being important," Widow Sayer said. "All winter, you made people depend on your food and remedies. Now you want us to depend on your opinion." Mara stared at her. "I brought you soup when you were ill, and we were grateful, but that does not make you one of us." The words cut deeper than any open insult. Around them stood people whose children Mara had tended, whose clothes she had mended, whose empty shelves she had quietly filled. Not one spoke for her. Conrad waited near the church steps, wearing an expression of patient sadness. "Miss Venn," he said, "this does not need to become ugly. Return the ledger and let trained officials handle the matter. Officials like the ones who changed it." A murmur moved through the crowd. Conrad sighed. "You are an outsider with a personal history that has made you suspicious. Mr. Marr is a grieving recluse. Perhaps neither of you sees the situation clearly." Amos nodded. Ivo was quiet until she came. Now there is trouble every week. "Maybe she likes stirring things," a man called. "Makes people look at something besides her size." Laughter broke from the edge of the crowd. Mara felt the old heat rise into her face. Her body became a cage made from every staring eye. She wanted to answer, but her throat closed. Ivo stepped in front of her. He did not raise his voice. "The next person who insults her will say it while looking at me." The laughter died. Conrad lifted his hands. There is no need for threats. That was a promise of conversation, Ivo said. You would know if I threatened you. Mara touched his arm. Let us go. They crossed the square together. No one followed. At the wagon, Mara climbed in without looking back. She remained silent until the town vanished behind the trees. You should not have to fight every person who mocks me, she said. Why not? Because there are too many. Then I will be busy. She almost smiled, but tears came instead. I helped them. I know. I did not expect love. I only thought kindness might earn kindness. Ivo stopped the wagon beside the road. Mara, look at me. She could not. He climbed down, walked around, and stood before her. Look at me. Slowly, she raised her eyes. They do not decide what you earned, he said. They only decide what kind of people they are. And what have they decided? That fear makes them small. Mara wiped her cheek. I wanted to save their land. Do you still? She thought about Widow Sayer's cold face, Amos's laughter, and the families who had looked away. Then she thought about the children who would inherit dry farms and debts they did not create. Yes, she whispered, but not because they deserve me. Ivo's gaze warmed. Why then? Because I deserve to finish what my father could not. That night, someone broke into the cabin. Mara woke to the sound of glass. A shadow moved in the main room. Before she could call out, Ivo was at her door with a lantern in one hand. He motioned for silence. The intruder fled through the kitchen, leaving the back door open to the rain. Nothing valuable was taken. The ledger was safe beneath a loose floorboard, but the cedar chest had been searched. Muddy prints crossed Talia's dresses. Ivo stood over them, breathing hard. This ends now. Yes, Mara said. We find the survey. I mean you go somewhere safe. Her expression changed. Where? The county seat. I will pay for a room. So Conrad frightens us, and I run? You could have been hurt. So could you. That is different. Because you are a man? Because this is your land? Or because losing me would be easier if you sent me away first? The question struck him silent. Mara's anger softened. Ivo, I know what you are afraid of. You know nothing about it. I know you still fold Talia's shawl every month, though no one touches it. I know you carve birds and turn them toward the door. I know you stop breathing when I cough in my sleep. Pain moved across his face. I am not Talia, Mara said gently. Caring for me will not bring her back, and sending me away will not keep grief from finding you. You ask me to stand here while men come through my door looking for you. No, I ask you to stand beside me while we make sure they never need to come again. He stared at her for a long time. If something happened to you, something has happened to me every day of my life. I survived it before I knew you. The truth hurt him, but it also released something. Ivo reached for her, slowly enough that she could step away. Mara did not move. His arms came around her heavy waist. She rested her cheek against his chest and heard his heart beating fast. I do not know how to do this, he whispered into her hair. Neither do I. I am afraid. So am I. He held her more tightly. Stay anyway. I will. Before dawn, Nessa arrived on foot. One of Conrad's men had searched her house as well. Her husband, Jory, wanted her to stop helping. He says we should sign and be grateful, she said. He says I am risking the children. Mara poured coffee into her shaking hands. You can stop. I will not blame you. Nessa looked at the steam rising from the cup. When the hotel turned you away, I was in the dining room. Mara said nothing. I was one of the women drinking tea. I did not make the joke, but I laughed. Tears gathered in Nessa's eyes. I laughed because the others did, and I was afraid they would turn on me if I defended you. Then my boy became sick, and you opened your door. I remember. I cannot change that day, but I can decide who I am today. Nessa set down the cup. Tell me where we are going. The three left for first water before sunrise. They climbed an abandoned logging path, then hid the horses in a grove of young pines. The old mill had collapsed years ago. Only its stone foundation remained beside a clear spring that bubbled from beneath a granite shelf. Where the first water sings beneath the stone, Mara murmured. They searched for hours. Ivo examined the foundation. Nessa checked beneath rotted boards. Mara sat near the spring, reading Daniel Rook's letter again. Water slipped through cracks in the stone and made a faint ringing sound. She leaned closer. One section of granite was not part of the mountain. It had been fitted into place. "Ivo!" she called. Together, they cleared moss and mud from the edges. Ivo used an iron bar to shift the stone. Behind it was a narrow hollow containing a rusted metal tube sealed with wax. Inside lay a rolled survey map, a signed statement from Daniel Rook, and 17 original property descriptions. The names matched every family North Crest was pressuring. Nessa began to laugh and cry at the same time. Ivo looked at Mara with quiet wonder. "You found it," he said. "Daniel found it," she replied. "We only listened." A branch snapped above them. 2 company men stood on the path. One held a revolver low against his leg. The other was Lyle Penn, Conrad's assistant. "Hand over the tube," Lyle said. Ivo moved in front of Mara and Nessa. His hand rested near his own holster. "Nobody needs to be foolish," Lyle continued. "Mr. Vale only wants company property." "A dead surveyor's statement is not company property," Mara said. "You have caused enough trouble. Then let a court decide." Lyle raised the revolver slightly. "Give it to me." The soft sound of hooves came from the ridge. Everyone turned. Sheriff Dane appeared between the trees, with Reverend Cole and 3 armed settlers behind him. Nessa released a breath. Before leaving home, she had sent her oldest daughter to the sheriff with a letter explaining where they were going and why. She had finally learned that courage did not always need to be loud. Sometimes it needed to plan ahead. Lyle lowered his weapon. Sheriff Dane took the metal tube and read Daniel's statement. His face changed line by line. The final paragraph named 2 county officials and the Bellweather Mining Trust. It also stated that any later deed based on the altered survey was fraudulent. "We need to take this to the county judge," the sheriff said. "We take it to the people first," Mara replied. "North Crest depends on them being afraid and alone. Let them see the truth together." The meeting was set for the following evening in the hotel dining room. Conrad tried to cancel it. When that failed, he claimed the newly discovered map was false. He sent riders toward the county seat, likely hoping to reach friendly officials before the evidence did. Mara spent the night organizing every document. She matched the original property descriptions to the altered entries, then to North Crest's contracts. She wrote the explanation in plain language, so no polished lawyer could bury the truth beneath difficult words. Near midnight, Ivo found her asleep at the table, with her cheek against one arm. A lamp lit the waves of her dark hair. Ink marked 2 of her fingers. He covered her with Talia's blue shawl, then stood watching her. Mara woke. When she saw the shawl, she touched it carefully. "Are you sure?" Ivo nodded. "It was made to keep someone warm." She looked at him, understanding what the gesture cost. "Thank you," he sat beside her. "Tomorrow may not change them. I know. Even if they believe the evidence, shame can make people cruel. I know that too. Then why are you trembling?" Mara looked down at her hands. "Because I have imagined standing before people like them since I was a girl. I used to dream I would find the right paper and save my father. Tomorrow, I will be standing in another room, trying to do it for 17 families who would not give me one bed." Ivo turned her hand over and pressed his palm against hers. "You will not stand alone." The hotel was crowded long before the meeting began. Farmers, miners, shopkeepers, and laborers filled every chair. Others stood along the walls. Conrad Vale sat near the front, with a lawyer from North Crest. Amos Rusk had placed a small table beneath the lamps for Mara's papers, though he complained it blocked the servers. When Mara entered, conversation faded. She wore a dark blue dress Nessa had helped her alter. It followed the full shape of her body, instead of trying to hide it. Talia's shawl rested around her shoulders. Ivo walked at her side, not ahead of her. Nessa followed with the metal tube. Mara felt every eye. For once, she did not lower hers. Conrad stood. Before this spectacle begins, I must object. Miss Venn is not a surveyor, a lawyer, or a property owner. She is a temporary guest with a personal dislike of land companies. I am also the woman who read the contracts you hoped no one would read, Mara said. A few people shifted in their seats. Conrad smiled. And what qualifies you to interpret them? Losing my childhood home to men who used the same kind of fraud. A sad history does not create expertise. No, study does. Mara placed the ledger on the table. After my family lost our farm, I spent years learning bookkeeping, property descriptions, and contract terms. I wanted to understand how a lie could wear the clothing of law. She unrolled Daniel Rook's original survey. Nessa pinned the corners with water glasses. This map was signed in 1872 and hidden by the county surveyor after he discovered that company agents were changing official copies. Sheriff Dane found it with us at first water. Reverend Cole witnessed its removal from a sealed metal tube. The Reverend stood. That is true. Conrad's lawyer rose. The chain of possession is questionable. Then question it in court, Mara said. Tonight, the families deserve to know what your contracts take. She called Jory Orr forward. On the original map, his property extended to the northern spring. On the altered record, the boundary stopped 50 yards short. Northcrest's contract offered money for a harmless adjustment, while quietly requiring Jory to recognize the false boundary. Once you sign, Mara told him, you agree that the spring was never yours. The company can close it the next day. Jory looked toward Conrad. You said our water was safe. Industrial access would benefit everyone, Conrad replied. Mara showed the Cale family's papers next. Their narrow west field looked unimportant, until she placed all 17 properties together. The fields formed a complete corridor from the mine to the railway pass. Northcrest could move ore through the valley without paying the remaining landowners. More important, it would control every reliable source of water. They are not saving Bellweather, Mara said. They are buying the lock, the road, and the well. Once they own those, they own the future of every family in this room. Silence settled over the crowd. Widow Sayer stood slowly. I already signed. The contract was based on a false claim, Mara said. The survey gives you grounds to challenge it. Will you help me? The question hung between them. Mara remembered the laundry door closing in her face. Widow Sayer remembered it too. Shame bent her proud shoulders. I will show every family what the papers mean, Mara answered. What happens after that will be decided by the court. Amos Rusk pushed through the crowd. You knew? He asked Conrad. You knew the hotel would lose access to the road. Conrad's calm finally cracked. Bellweather is a dying settlement. Northcrest is offering progress. This woman arrived with nothing and has filled your heads with fear because she wants revenge on anyone more successful than her. Mara faced him across the table. If I wanted revenge, I could let them sign. The words were quiet, but they reached every corner of the room. Conrad looked around and realized the crowd had turned. These papers prove nothing until a judge accepts them. Sheriff Dane stepped forward. Then you will have no objection to coming with me while the county examines them. On what charge? Attempting to take evidence at gunpoint is a place to start. Mr. Penn has been talking since this morning. Lyle stood near the back with a deputy beside him. He would not meet Conrad's eyes. No shot was fired. No one threw a punch. Conrad was led out through the same hotel doors Mara had entered months earlier. The power left him not with blood or noise, but with the soft scrape of paper being gathered into a case. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Jory Orr removed his hat. Miss Venn, he said, you saved our spring. Nessa saved it too. Mara looked toward her friend. She collected the contracts, sent for help, and stood beside the truth when it cost her something. Nessa's eyes filled with tears. One by one, the townspeople began to approach. Some thanked Mara, some apologized. Most could barely look at her. Reverend Cole admitted that the parish room had never been under repair. He had feared the church council's opinion. Widow Sayer confessed that she had judged Mara before hearing her speak. Amos Rusk offered her a permanent room at the hotel and a position managing its accounts. Mara listened without smiling. "When I came to Bellweather," she said, "I believed being useful would make you see me as human. I cooked for you, cared for your children, and carried food to your homes. Still, when powerful men asked you to choose between their approval and my dignity, most of you chose them. No one moved. I am glad your homes can be saved," she continued. "I am glad your children will have water. But gratitude does not erase what happened. An apology is not a key that opens the door to my trust. If you want forgiveness, begin by becoming people who would not close that door on the next stranger." Amos lowered his eyes. The room was so quiet that the creak could be heard beyond the windows. Mara gathered her papers. For years, she had imagined approval as a warm light waiting at the end of suffering. Now, standing before the people who had denied it, she felt no hunger for it. Their shame belonged to them. Her worth belonged to her. Outside the hotel, the night air was cool and clean. Ivo followed her onto the porch. Lamps shone along the street, but the settlement no longer seemed larger than she was. "You did it," he said. "We did." "No." Ivo shook his head. "I carried a box and looked threatening. You made them understand." Mara laughed softly. "You are very skilled at looking threatening. Years of practice." She turned toward him. "When I arrived, I thought beginning again meant finding a place where no one knew me. I was wrong. What does it mean, knowing myself well enough that the place cannot decide who I am?" Ivo looked toward the mountain. "And where do you want to be?" Before she could answer, the hotel door opened. The crowd began spilling into the street. Ivo had spent years avoiding the eyes of Bellweather. Now he turned toward them and reached for Mara's hand. She stiffened. In private, he had held her through fear and grief. In town, he had defended her. But this was different. This was a choice made openly, with no danger to excuse it. Ivo laced his fingers through hers. "Mara Venn," he said, loud enough for those nearest to hear. "I have lived alone because I thought an empty house could not hurt me. Then you entered it, and proved emptiness was the hurt." Her eyes widened. "You do not owe me an answer tonight," he continued, "but I will not hide what you are to me. You are not someone I need to cook my meals or keep my accounts. You are the person I want beside me when there is nothing to fix and no danger to fight. You are the voice I listen for on the path. You are the light I look for in the window." His voice roughened. "You have become my home." Tears slipped down Mara's round cheeks. This time, she did not hide them. "Ivo, I take up a great deal of room." He stepped closer. "Then perhaps I will finally stop living in half a life." Mara touched his scarred cheek. "You stubborn mountain man. Is that a yes?" "It is the beginning of one." She kissed him beneath the hotel lamps while the settlement watched. Some people smiled. Others looked away, embarrassed by the memory of their own words. Mara did not care. Ivo's hands rested gently at her waist, not ashamed of her body, not surprised by it, simply grateful that she was there. The county investigation lasted through summer. Daniel Rook's survey was confirmed as genuine. North Crest's claims were suspended, and 3 officials were removed for accepting company money. Conrad Vale faced trial for fraud and intimidation. The settlers recovered their water rights, though some spent months undoing contracts they had signed too quickly. Bellweather changed, but not all at once. Real change rarely arrives with music. It appears in smaller choices. Amos widened the hotel dining room between tables and ordered stronger chairs without making a show of it. Reverend Cole opened the parish room to stranded travelers before the church council could object. Widow Sayer hired a young mother no one else would employ. Jory began asking Nessa's opinion before signing papers. Some people remained unkind. Mara learned that saving a person's land did not automatically enlarge their heart, but cruelty no longer had the same power over her. When someone whispered, she did not become smaller. She met their eyes and allowed the silence to return to them. Mara opened a small office in a room beside the general store. A hand-painted sign read, "Mara Venn, accounts and contracts. Farmers brought deeds, loan papers, and supply agreements for her to examine. She charged those who could pay and accepted eggs, cloth, or firewood from those who could not. No family in Bellweather signed away a boundary without understanding every word again. Nessa worked with her 3 mornings each week. She became skilled at copying records and noticing missing pages. More than that, she stopped disappearing inside other people's opinions. When a customer once made a cruel remark about Mara's size, Nessa calmly gathered his papers and returned them. "We do not serve that kind of poverty here," she said. The man looked confused. "I have money." "That was not the poverty I meant." Mara laughed about it for days. She kept her room at Ivo's cabin, though the word spare no longer described it. Her dresses hung beside his coats. Her recipe box sat near the stove. Talia's blue shawl remained on the chair, but it no longer felt like a warning from the past. It became part of the home, a tender reminder that love did not replace what came before. It simply made room beside it. One evening, near the end of summer, Mara found Ivo carving another bird. This one was larger, with rounded wings and a strong, lifted head. "Which way will it face?" she asked. Ivo set it on the windowsill. Unlike the others, it faced into the room. "It is not waiting," he said. Mara sat beside him. "Do you still fear losing me? Every day. That does not sound encouraging. You asked for truth." He took her hand. "I used to think fear meant I should not love. Now I think it means love matters." Mara rested her head against his shoulder. "I still hear them sometimes. Who? Everyone who called me too large, too hungry, too desperate to be chosen. Their voices come back when a chair creaks or a dress fits badly. What do you do?" "I let them speak. Then I remember they were wrong." Ivo kissed her dark hair. "If you forget, I will remind you. And if you forget you are allowed to be happy, you will make porridge." That is a serious threat. His laughter filled the cabin. It was still a rough, unfamiliar sound, but it no longer startled him. The following spring, they married beside First Water. Mara chose the place because it was where a hidden truth had waited patiently beneath stone. Nessa stood with her. Reverend Cole performed the ceremony, his voice unsteady when he spoke of grace. Half the settlement attended, and the other half pretended they had not wanted to. Mara wore a cream-colored dress made to celebrate her full figure, with soft sleeves around her heavy arms and a simple line of green embroidery at the collar. Her dark hair fell in waves down her back. She did not ask whether the dress made her look smaller. She did not want to look smaller. When Ivo saw her, the intimidating mountain man forgot every word he had prepared. His grey eyes filled, and Mara smiled. "You are staring," she whispered when she reached him. "I am trying to understand how one person can look like a woman and a miracle at the same time. That is a very polished sentence for you. I practiced it all winter. Then I am glad you remembered." They made their promises beside the spring, while water sang beneath the stone. Ivo promised not to confuse fear with wisdom. Mara promised not to measure herself by the smallness of other minds. Together, they promised to keep a home where no traveler would be turned away for looking poor, strange, tired, or different. Years later, people in Bellweather still told the story of the land company and the hidden survey. Some made themselves sound braver than they had been. Some forgot to mention how they had treated Mara when she first arrived. But the oldest children remembered. They remembered the heavy woman walking through town with her head lowered. They remembered the night she stood in the hotel and saved every spring in the valley. They remembered how quiet the room became when she said she could have taken revenge simply by letting them sign. Mara never needed to remind anyone. Her life did that for her. The cabin beneath the stone ridge grew into a wide, warm house with a long table and strong chairs. Travelers stopped there during storms. Hungry children knew there would always be bread. Ivo filled the windowsills with wooden birds, some facing the door and some facing inward. Mara filled shelves with ledgers, letters, and jars of summer fruit. In winter, firelight moved across the walls, and the sound of their voices reached the path outside. The town had once looked at Mara Venn and seen only the space her body occupied. Ivo looked at her and saw the space her courage created for others. Nessa saw a second chance to become brave. The families of Bellweather saw, too late, the intelligence and mercy they had nearly driven into the mountains forever. That was the consequence they carried. The woman they had mocked became the reason their children inherited homes. The stranger they refused to shelter built a house known for sheltering strangers. The person they called too much became the one who gave without losing herself. And that was Mara's greatest victory. She did not make herself thin enough for their comfort, quiet enough for their approval, or bitter enough to resemble their cruelty. She exposed the lie, saved the land, and walked away from the need to be welcomed by people who had once rejected her. She chose a man who loved her openly, a friend who learned to speak, and a life large enough to hold every part of her. On clear evenings, Mara and Ivo often sat outside and watched the sun lower behind the mountains. The light turned the cliffs gold, then rose pink, then deep violet. Below them, Bellweather's lamps appeared one by one. The settlement no longer looked like a place that had judged her. It looked like a place that had been forced to learn. Ivo would place one arm around her, and Mara would lean into the warmth of him. Neither believed love could prevent loss. They had suffered too much for such a simple belief. But they understood something stronger. Love could give a wounded person somewhere to stand. It could turn an empty cabin into a home, regret into courage, and a hidden truth into justice. Mara had climbed the mountain because she thought there was nowhere left for her to go. Instead, she found the first place where she did not have to shrink. And Ivo, who had closed his heart to keep grief outside, discovered that a closed heart also kept out wonder. Together, they opened the door.